This week in Billionaires, human resources software startup Deal announced a $300 million funding round on October 16, boosting the company's valuation to $17.3 billion, higher than its leading rival, Rippling. The deal added $500 million apiece to the fortunes of co-founders Alex Bouaziz and Shuo Wang, who are now each worth an estimated $2 billion. Open Evidence, a startup that uses AI to help doctors search through and understand medical research, announced a $200 million funding round on Monday that valued the firm at $6 billion. The round boosted the net worth of the company's CEO and co-founder Daniel Nadler to $3.6 billion, thanks to his estimated 60% stake. Shares in data storage company Pure Storage have jumped by more than 120% over the past 6 months, pushing the firm's co-founder John Colgrove into the billionaire ranks. The 16-year-old company has a strategic partnership with tech giant Meta to help build its AI supercomputers, and Colgrove is now worth an estimated $1.2 billion thanks to his 4% stake in Pure Storage. Welcome to Beyond the Billions. I'm Giacomo Tognini, a deputy editor here at Forbes, and joining me today is Nina Bambysheva, a deputy editor on the money team at Forbes. Nina, thanks for being here. And first up, do you dream about crypto?
I think at this point I do.
So how did you first get into crypto? Obviously, you've been covering it for several years now, but how did you first get interested in it as a reporter?
I first learned of crypto shortly after the 2017 ICO bubble burst. I took a course on blockchain technology in college, and I didn't really follow it until 2020 when DeFi started growing significantly. And in November of that year, I joined Forbes and been covering crypto ever since.
And correct me if I'm wrong here, but ICO, initial coin offering, DeFi,
Yes.
Decentralized finance?
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
Sorry. Yeah. Crypto is full of these jargony terms that maybe... Yeah, sometimes I forget that a lot of people are not well versed. So thank you for...
No, it's like I also first learned kind of a crypto in 2017 when a friend of mine had crypto kitties, which then were kind of known as NFTs,
Yeah.
right? But at the time...
Not at the time,
Not at the
but
time,
later,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah. So I guess to that point, though, you were talking about that initial sort of bubble in 2017 and then again in 2020. How do you report on an industry, an asset class that has been so volatile over the last few years?
It is crazy. People often say time moves differently in crypto. In 1 month, so many things happen. You feel like it's been a year. Yeah, it is crazy. I think, especially in bull markets, a lot of things tend to happen simultaneously. Now with much warmer regulatory climate for crypto in the US, President Trump's support of the industry, you just see everyone raising or announcing partnerships, rolling out products. So yeah, it's a lot.
And I guess that's completely different to like the bust times, right? When I guess it was harder to...
Well,
still a lot to cover on the
last
side,
bear market was kind of wild too because we've seen so many bankruptcies. FTX bankruptcy was very complicated. People are just getting paid out, and it's been 3 years now. So yeah, even in bear markets, there's a lot to write about, particularly about all the kind of reasons and mess that led up to it.
Well, we wanted to kind of dig onto a recent trend you wrote about, which is Bitcoin treasuries, right? So I guess like break it down. How do they work and why has this become such a big trend this year and recently?
Well, it's not just Bitcoin at this point, though. Vast majority of companies buying crypto are Bitcoin holding companies. So they're called Digital Asset Treasury Companies, DATs.
Another acronym there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so it really started with Michael Saylor's MicroStrategy, now known as Strategy, back in 2020 when he announced that the company will start buying Bitcoin. And now it has grown into an industry of its own. We now have over 200 companies doing a crypto treasury strategy. they've announced about $150 billion in capital raises to acquire various cryptocurrencies from Bitcoin to Ethereum, Solana, Avalanche. I can go on and on. And really, it is what the name suggests. These are companies whose primary strategy is to buy up as much of a cryptocurrency that they've chosen. And yeah, well, then we have this separation. Some will be just holding companies, not that different from ETFs, I guess, but many have announced also plans to really create actual strategies around this capital to make it productive, whether it'll be lending Bitcoin or staking Ethereum, Solana, so that it earns additional yield. We have yet to see many of those executed. And from what I hear, not many teams have actually figured out what it is they want to do. But that is kind of the next phase.
And I mean, to go back to strategy, right, the one that kind of started this trend, you had this fantastic profile of Michael Saylor last year. You met with him. I guess, how was he in person, and sort of why do you think he sort of pioneered the strategy? What's sort of the origins of that?
Well, thank you. Speaking of people who dream about crypto, Michael Saylor is that person. I straight up asked him, what do you dream about? And he said, Bitcoin. He is very committed, very focused. It is what he does all day, just talks about Bitcoin, educates people. He was a skeptic himself. And in COVID, he just, I think, started thinking about kind of the company strategy, has been trading at about 1.5 billion valuation at the time, and it didn't really go much above that for almost 20 years. So he kind of tried, in his words, everything under the sun to make it grow, and it didn't really work out. And then he turned to Bitcoin, and thoughts of inflation and money printing in COVID, I think, also just convinced him further that this might be something worthy to do now. It is important to say that although MicroStrategy pioneered this, they didn't really figure out the exact strategy as it is today. Back then, it was also a learning process for them. But at this point, it is absolutely a humongous company with, I think, about $70 billion in Bitcoin now. It is trading at about 90 billion. It was worth over 100 billion when I interviewed him. Yes. And
they've been able to build up that treasury through sort of share issuances, or
debt issuance, equity issuance. And I think it is really unique in that sense that it has really shown the market what a public company can do when it starts buying crypto, because they have this advantage of being able to appeal to different kinds of investors with different risk profiles. Strategy is issued convertible debt, equity, preferred equity, all these different types of instruments that sophisticated investors want, and with exposure to Bitcoin, of course.
And you were in your story, right? There's over 70 publicly traded companies doing this, right? Holding tens of...
Now about, I think, about 200.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Crazy. But it's not just in the U.S., right? I know there's a big company out of Japan, Metaplanet.
Yes.
I guess, how has it been spreading beyond the U.S.?
Absolutely. We've seen companies in Europe, in France do it. Metaplanet, company from Japan, one of the most successful followers of Saylor. We've seen companies in Korea launch these strategies. So it is a global phenomenon now.
And who are the other big billionaire names doing this, right? Because we've talked about Saylor, Trump, President Trump's I forget the exact
Trump
acronym.
Media and
Trump Media
Technology
Technology Group. There we go. Yeah, I remember TMTG. They are basically converting to a treasury at this point. How have you been following the sort of influx of other big names getting into this?
I think this is precisely why we like this story, because it involves so many billionaires. As you mentioned, President Trump, his sons too, Eric and Don Jr. started a Bitcoin treasury company. Mike Novogratz is also involved. Tether backed this company 21 Capital, which is also backed by Cantor Fitzgerald, formerly led by U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick.
All of these people, billionaires themselves.
Yeah,
right?
Justin Sun
Yeah.
announced a treasury strategy company around Tron. So a whole host of wealthy people.
And do you think most of them are kind of just copying Saylor, or do they have different, and they're just trying to join in on the boom, or what do you think about, I guess, their thinking behind this?
Right. So I think not many companies can emulate Saylor at this point, simply due to its size, first of all. And then also, I think because with so many companies competing against each other, essentially, they have to find their edge. So that will be the next phase. As I mentioned, we have yet to see what they will come up with, because many of the capital raises that have been announced haven't been completed. Some of the companies either pivoted, so if they were in medical business, for example, they would announce a digital asset treasury strategy and do it in addition to the operating business. But in many instances, we would get new companies raising capital or doing SPAC mergers. So a lot of those transactions haven't closed yet. And that is kind of when what I call the Hunger Games phase of this market, where they will have to show their staying power, their edge.
And see how it all kind of shakes out at that point. Yeah. I guess like one thing I was wondering when reading your stories is, how is this, I guess what are the risks and benefits to your average investor, compared to trying to buy Bitcoin directly or through an exchange like Coinbase or, getting to one of like the Bitcoin ETFs, I guess, or, like Grayscale Bitcoin Trust. If you're looking at the other ways that you can actually invest in crypto, what are the benefits and risks of this model of like investing in a strategy or one of these other companies?
I'll go back here a little bit. So when Strategy started buying Bitcoin, we still didn't have approved ETFs in the US. So it was one of the few, if not the only way for public market participants to get exposure to crypto. But when ETFs got approved, many people started questioning why buy Strategy when I have an ETF? And I think it's been able to show why with all the sophisticated financial engineering. But I will say that, so we have in the US now ETFs for Bitcoin and Ethereum, but not all those other cryptocurrencies that may be inaccessible to US investors. And you can get that exposure by investing in those companies. Also, if you don't want to hold crypto directly, you can just buy stock and not worry about custody, keys, etc. And one other differentiator to ETFs, I think, is with ETFs, those vehicles just track the price of the underlying asset, right? So they're passively managed. Some of these companies now have teams behind them who think about, as I mentioned, ways to put this capital to use. So the main differentiator here is active strategies. The risks are, of course, now, if they do it in a smart way, if they put the money into right instruments, and there are certain, last bear market we saw how some of those platforms just lacked basic risk management. So those types of things, I'd say. And also, just in general, it was very apparent from the beginning with trend that explosive. Some of those opportunities are cash grabs, and now the market is starting to shake out those. Well, they will probably become good acquisition opportunities for bigger companies.
And I guess to your point on how they're managed, right? A lot of them are taking on significant amounts of debt, right, to buy these cryptocurrencies. So that'll be another thing to watch, right? In terms of how, if it does shake out the wrong way, you got to pick the right one, right? That's managing it, being managed prudently.
Right. Although I've spoken to some analysts and they said they aren't that worried about that because much of the debt is distributed across larger players like Strategy, Metaplanet, and they have been in the money, so trading way above. Like Bitcoin would have to fall by, I don't know, 80% for them to not be able to cover that, and they said they wouldn't sell. So I think for now, people aren't that worried about that, but yes, watch out for all those aspects. I mean, all those companies have announced, pipe deals or SPAC mergers. Those are quite complicated transactions that take time, and we'll see.
Yeah, I guess, are there ones that you're particularly watching in terms of they have a novel strategy or there's an odd team? Because there's a lot of people coming into this that don't have much background in crypto, right? As well as people who do have a lot. So are there any particular names that are...
I think it's been interesting to see the emergence of new leaders of this trend. It's not just Michael Saylor now. Yeah. For Ethereum, we now have Tom Lee, who's leading the largest Ethereum treasury company, or venture capitalist Kyle Samani, who's involved in one of the Solana companies. And I think that's another differentiator for these companies, the management. Yeah. How well these teams will be able to tell the story to a wider set of investors, why they should care about this company, the underlying asset. And one other point I'll make here is because it's such a new market and so many new names, we don't have much analyst coverage around these. Right. So it's very important for those teams to also communicate properly to market participants around what they're doing, what exactly their strategy is, how they're different.
And I guess there's not even that many analysts who will have known, who will have enough experience in crypto, right?
Exactly. Even those who do are losing track of so many deals are still getting announced. Yeah. So, yeah.
Another really interesting part of your most recent story was this term about market to net asset value, right? Could you break that down a little bit and sort of explain why that's an important metric to look at for these companies?
To the same point I just made, I think because we don't have that many metrics yet to value these companies, and because they're different, some have operating businesses, still some just do the strategy. So I guess it's one way to look at how these companies are performing, and the metric is essentially taking market cap of the company and comparing it to net asset value of its holdings. And we've seen that over the past few weeks, a lot of them, 15 to 25% by different measures, have been trading below their net asset value. Now, it might make it difficult for those firms to attract more capital. I think it might also signal that they are sort of worse off than the competitors. But again, it's we're just starting to see the shakeout.
And I guess why is it that some of these are trading below? Because it's if your sort of only asset really is a cryptocurrency, and it's not like sometimes you have these holding companies that will own stake in various companies, and there's different ways to value it, right? But in this case, it's kind of like they own 1,000 Bitcoin, the value is what it is, right? So what do you think is happening that's causing this disconnect?
I think because precisely there are various components to this puzzle, whether there is an operating, some data trackers who provide this data also include companies like Tesla, who are, you wouldn't call them a digital asset treasury strategy, but they do have Bitcoin on their balance sheet. Right? And they're ones that have just been announced. In some instances, we actually look at the publicly traded SPACs that haven't yet completed mergers. So they will trade with a very small market cap.
Right, and they don't have the assets.
Exactly,
yet, right?
Not yet. Right, so there's one thing there as well. So I'd say it's kind of case-by-case basis in some instances. Also, one interesting example was a company called KindlyMD/Nakamoto Holdings, led by David Bailey, Trump's crypto advisor. So last month, he published a letter to investors where he basically said, if you're not a believer in this, we'd rather not have you, because
as an investor, like to sell your stock, basically.
Well, if you don't believe in this trend and then you don't see the value and you're just doing it for a cash grab, we want investors who are aligned, and it is a valid point, but it can also, spook the market. So the stock dipped. So yeah, various things to look at.
Do these companies that trade at a discount to MNAV, are they a better buying opportunity, do you think? Or what have the analysts you've been talking to say about
they
it?
could be. They're certainly, if you look at it simply, they are discounted opportunities. But I saw some analysts draw comparisons to GBTC, the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust, back when it was a closed-end fund and traded at a 40% plus discount. But there was kind of a path to an ETF for that discount to collapse. Here, not really. I mean, one thing you could think about is, okay, this company might become acquired later on. So another company can grow their treasury, basically. Exactly, yeah. We've already seen, I think, a couple of those happen, and analysts predict many more down the line.
So the idea is that you'd invest, and then down the line, they'll get acquired for closer to the true value of
So I think that's one way to look at it. But again, many of these are unproven, literally.
Do you think these are here to stay? I guess long term. You've been covering crypto fully for 5 years now. You've seen so many different companies come and go. You've seen so many different trends, right? I mean, NFTs aren't a huge thing anymore, for example. Do you think that treasury companies are here to stay, or do you think it's a little too soon to tell?
I think that this trend will be with us for a while in some shape or form, for a few reasons. One, I think strategy has shown the market how great the strategy is, really. I mean, their stock is up over 2,000% since they started buying Bitcoin.
And Saylor's net worth has rocketed
exactly.
up, right?
MetaPlanet that we've talked about is over 3,000%. There is much better environment for crypto in the U.S. Inflation, if you think that's a good hedge. Other factors I'd consider is that, again, these companies provide exposure that investors would, in many cases, not have otherwise. To many of those smaller cryptocurrencies. So many billionaires and really interesting people involved who have a track record of building successful businesses, and they're all big bulls of the trend. then we have, again, I mentioned Tesla. We'll probably have more companies buy crypto, maybe not as a full-blown strategy, but exploring it, because it is clear that institutions are becoming more and more open towards dabbling with crypto, holding it. And I think just seeing what strategies these companies employ, or the financial engineering involved, like in the case of strategy, that they can appeal to various investors. I think those are the things that are kind of going for these DATs.
Yeah, I mean, so many big personalities involved, so many companies to keep track of. It'll be really interesting to follow your reporting, and thanks so much for being here, Nina. It's been really interesting.
Thank you for having me.
To read Nina's stories and the other articles we mentioned in this episode, you can check the show notes.